armored units, ready for attack, moved forward in close formation. Their target was clear: break through the defense, crush resistance points, and clear the way. But this time, their advance would not go as planned, because those roads were no longer just asphalt. They were being watched by invisible eyes, and every step was being calculated. The first group of tanks to move forward was detected by drone systems previously deployed by Ukrainian forces. A silent observation drone transmitted detailed information about the convoy's structure and route to the command center. Then, the first of the attack drones waiting in the air took action. The explosive-laden drone, descending at high speed, spotted an opening in the armor of the lead tank. Within seconds, it locked onto its target and struck directly, engulfing the vehicle in flames. The impact of the explosion caused the armored vehicle behind it to stall. However, waiting proved to be an even greater mistake. The second drone was already in the air. It found its target without hesitation. The second tank was also reduced to a stationary wreck. Before the armored units could understand the source of the attack, the third and fourth drone strikes began. Diving from above the tanks, these unmanned vehicles systematically collapsed the defense with high accuracy, each striking a separate point. This was not just an attack, it was a premeditated, carefully planned annihilation. A few vehicles attempting to escape tried to maneuver backward. However, the escape routes were no longer safe. Surveillance drones deployed across the terrain continuously monitored the escape routes. A new wave of attacks began. One of the tanks trying to retreat got stuck in a narrow passage. The attack drone targeted the turret directly. The explosion was powerful enough to split the armored hull in two. When the Ukrainian forces confirmed that the advance had completely stopped, the second wave of drones set off. This time, the targets were support vehicles trying to hide among the wreckage. The wheeled armored vehicles were detected as they attempted to reach a safe area via dirt roads. The drones did not give up. Each one approached at high speed and struck its target from the air. Some were neutralized with the first blow, while others burst into flames and exploded. What stood out in Ukraine's operations was the use of a wave-like strategy rather than a single-pronged attack. The first wave of drones neutralized the target, followed by subsequent waves to finish the job. Throughout the process, no human soldiers were directly exposed to risk. When it became clear that the first line had collapsed, the rear units hesitated. However, this indecision was short-lived. The newly arrived armored group attempted to advance by bypassing the debris in front. The command unit must have believed the situation was temporary. But what awaited them were not only destroyed vehicles, but also silent eyes waiting in the sky. The new convoy attempted to bypass the main route using one of the side lanes. Drones monitored this maneuver every step of the way. The right moment to act was awaited. As the armored vehicles passed through a narrow passage in single file, the first attack was launched. The front vehicle was stopped by a drone attack that exploded right in the middle of it. As the others tried to maneuver to escape, a second drone arrived. A tank at the rear of the convoy was hit in the turret. Flames engulfed the entire passageway. For the Ukrainian operators watching from above, this moment marked the point where the attack would be most effective. The tanks stuck in the middle of the passage were unable to maneuver to the right or left. The third and fourth drone attacks were not long in coming. Each one hit its target with pinpoint accuracy. The vehicles caught fire, some exploded, and others began burning with their engines still running. A wave of panic quickly spread through the convoy. Soldiers jumped out of the vehicles and tried to take cover in the surrounding area. However, the eyes in the sky were not only recording the tanks, but also every movement near them. One tank, attempting to retreat from its position, was struck on its upper armor by a descending drone. The explosion was powerful enough to shatter the hull. Support teams deployed a new group of vehicles to halt the chaos. However, this new group was already on the radar of drone units waiting at the edge of the attack zone. Though their approach directions differed, their fate was the same. The first vehicle experienced a brief pause while moving forward. At that moment, the drone attack struck. The following vehicles also became trapped in the same narrow lane. As a result of the successive attacks, access to the area was completely blocked. Ukrainian forces did not stop at halting the enemy vehicles. The tanks, which were immobilized and unable to advance despite not sustaining significant damage, were targeted by a second wave of drones. This time, the drones were specifically directed at the vehicle's weak points. One was aimed directly at the exhaust outlet, another at the turret connection point, and the third at the thinnest part of the armor. Each one caused a massive explosion after completing its task. At this stage, more than half of the armored vehicles participating in the attack were either completely destroyed or severely damaged. A few vehicles attempted to escape to other areas of the terrain, but Ukrainian drones tracked their maneuvers. A low-flying drone headed toward a fast-moving tank and hit its target. The tank stopped immediately, and the vehicles behind it crashed into each other. The attack was now no longer a defensive operation, but one of absolute destruction. Ukrainian forces did not allow any armored vehicles to escape from this area. Vehicles attempting to retreat were forced to slow down due to the risk of mines. Every slowing target became an easy target for the drones. As a result, this new group that set out to advance was neutralized, just like the first group. The entire area was covered in burned-out hulls and silence. Despite reports that the first two armored groups had been completely destroyed, reaching the command chain, the attack plan was not cancelled. This time, a new column set out to advance along a different route. The objective remained the same: to breach the defense line, establish control, and disperse the positions. However, Ukrainian forces had already detected this new movement well in advance. This new group chose to advance through different terrain. The road was narrower, and the surroundings were more rugged. However, this geographical difference would not change the outcome, because drones could scan not only open areas, but also forested and narrow passages. They could observe silently. The first attack began in a similar manner. As the tank at the front of the convoy changed its route and passed through a small valley, a drone began to track it from above. A few seconds later, it quickly descended and targeted the tank's engine compartment, striking its target. The explosion immobilized the tank, causing those behind it to halt. This pause signaled the second attack. A new drone targeted the second tank that had come to a halt. This time, the hit was to the turret area. The ammunition exploded with high heat, shattering the vehicle's internal structure and rendering the entire armored line ineffective. The vehicles behind tried to retreat, but the narrow space was insufficient for maneuvering. One of the retreating tanks was spotted by observation drones as it moved through the trees. An attack drone quickly followed, approaching at low altitude to lock onto its target. This vehicle also exploded on the spot. As flames rose, the trees ceased to provide cover and began to spread the fire. The intensity of the fire prevented other vehicles from passing through. This new line was completely blocked within minutes. With advancement impossible, the rest of the convoy took up an indecisive, defensive position. However, this defensive stance was not enough to protect them. Ukrainian forces were launching equally effective attacks against stationary targets. Drones sent continuously identified the tanks in defensive positions one by one. The vehicle's top hatches, ventilation openings, and turret connection points were carefully scanned. Each drone was directed to a designated weak point. The result was the same. Every hit meant another explosion. Some vehicles became immobilized in the muddy terrain, making them easier targets. An armored vehicle with its engine running, but its wheels stuck in the mud, was rendered completely ineffective within seconds after being struck by a drone. The attack was so systematic and controlled that no vehicle that could not advance was able to escape. Every targeted tank was either instantly destroyed or rendered unusable with severe damage. All that remained were smoke, burning metal fragments, and silence. With the collapse of this third attack line, the full weight of the operation was attributed to the success of Ukraine's unmanned systems. Drones had become not just reconnaissance and strike assets, but a war strategy. All armored units advancing along 3 separate lines had already been neutralized. However, the attacks did not stop. This time, a different approach was attempted. A new armored group moved along a route distant from the previous ones. The aim was to surprise the Ukrainian defense, change the direction of the attack, and breach the front line with a surprise maneuver. However, Ukrainian forces had anticipated this maneuver and had already begun scanning the area with fixed and mobile surveillance drones monitoring the region. The incoming tank group was detected before it had fully entered range. Real-time images were transmitted to the command center, and a counterattack was launched. The first target was the tank providing flank protection for the convoy. The drone approached at low altitude and targeted the underside of the turret. The vehicle, moving in a confined space, was unable to escape the attack. The explosion knocked the tank onto its side. The vehicles behind it stopped in the shockwave. Another tank attempted to advance, creating a smokescreen to change position. However, this move did not escape the attention of the drone operators. Within seconds, a second drone was deployed. Despite limited visibility, it used thermal targeting to directly target the engine compartment. The drone locked onto the heat source and rendered the vehicle ineffective. As the smokescreen dissipated, the burning hull once again blocked the convoy's path. The attention of the Ukrainian forces was not limited to the vehicles at the front, but extended to the entire convoy. Drone networks were monitoring multiple points simultaneously and coordinating attacks at the appropriate moment. There was no room for chance in this attack pattern. Each drone was prepared for a specific target, took off, and was directed solely to complete its mission. The new target was a vehicle used for communication that had fallen behind the armored convoy. The vehicle was spotted when it stopped at a narrow road junction. The drone approached from above and targeted the open area. The explosion not only destroyed the vehicle, but also neutralized the military personnel around it. This dealt a direct blow to the convoy's ability to move and coordinate. Panic now reigned in the convoy. Vehicles were making random maneuvers, quickly changing direction to avoid colliding with each other. However, this chaotic structure made them even more vulnerable targets. The drones were programmed to follow vehicles making rapid maneuvers. This meant that instead of escaping, the targets were magnified. One vehicle entered a wooded area in an attempt to hide. However, a stationary surveillance drone immediately detected the armored vehicle trying to hide thanks to its thermal imaging. The drone sent to attack flew through the trees and landed directly on the upper area. The explosion was heard with a loud echo that broke the silence in the area. At this stage, there were still a few vehicles remaining in the convoy. However, as their room to maneuver narrowed, their options dwindled. Ukrainian forces patiently tracked these last vehicles, waiting for the right moment. Finally, when the hatch of a stationary tank opened, the operator exploited this weak point. The drone entered through a small opening and detonated inside. This attack rendered the vehicle completely unusable. This fourth line of attack met the same fate as the others. Another armored group that was supposed to advance was stopped before it could take a single step. Ukraine's drone tactics systematically dismantled this convoy as well. This operation was the story of a resistance that fundamentally changed the rules of conventional warfare. An attack that began with heavy armor, overwhelming force, and an all-out advance was stopped without any direct human contact. Ukrainian troops used the most effective weapon of the new era to defend their land: invisible eyes and silent wings. Every attack, every convoy, every tank. No matter which direction they came from, they all met the same end. None of them reached their targets as planned. Because in this battlefield, speed was as important as caution, and intelligence was as important as firepower. Drones did not just target vehicles. They targeted the structure of the attacks, their tactics, and their psychological superiority. Tanks could not advance because the road was no longer just asphalt, but a digital battlefield. Ukraine did not merely defend itself on the battlefield. It anticipated the attack, tracked it, analyzed it, and acted when the time was right. By minimizing human casualties, it masterfully utilized technology on the ground. As a result, it did not need heavy weapons or large forces to face heavily armored units. There were only operators waiting for the right moment and drones that knew their mission. Tanks, once symbols of progress, could not advance this time. Every vehicle attempting to move forward was stopped by a shadow from the sky. Some were destroyed with a single hit. Others caught fire and exploded, while some were abandoned where they stood. This was no coincidence. It was the result of a deliberate and disciplined strategy. When the tank's advance came to a halt, something far greater had been achieved. Ukraine had demonstrated the simple yet effective power of modern technology against a traditional military formation. This operation was not merely a series of destructions. It was also a message. Every move is being monitored, every plan is being analyzed, and every threat can be neutralized with a response faster than its own speed. Ultimately, this attack collapsed not only militarily, but also psychologically. The pressure created by the drones spread fear that tanks could not. Every attempt to advance was thwarted before it began. Every armored move ended before it even started. This was the new face of modern warfare. And in this new order, a drone from the sky could take down a tank with all its weight. This story is not just about a victory, but about a strategy, a technology, and a people's resistance. And in this story, everything begins with a quiet buzz, but its echo is heard across the entire front. What are your thoughts on this matter? We would appreciate it if you could share your opinions in the comments section. Thank you for following us. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and like our content to stay updated and support us.